Hey there, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Introducing Ops Manager webinar. My name is Andrew Davidson, and I'm a product manager here at MongoDB. And I wanted to kick this off by really sort of taking a step back before we talk about Ops Manager and really emphasize that we're all here because MongoDB, the database, is increasingly popular. And, it's hard to avoid these days. And increasingly, we are responsible for keeping it running in various organizations. So, it is indeed just about the fastest growing database you can find out there. It's increasingly ubiquitous across all kinds of organizations. And we're very excited that this week's release of MongoDB 3.0 and Ops Manager really represent a new foundation for the product and the suite of tooling around it to really bring MongoDB and its usage to the next level. Now, with that, I will introduce Ops Manager, which we believe is the best way to manage MongoDB in your data center. We think that while it requires some upfront setup time, in the end it will save you on the order of 95% of the overall operational overhead. And what that really means is you can do a heck of a lot more. What you're going to want as MongoDB is scaled and takes on more use cases within your organization, ranging from offload of legacy systems, moving away from those monolithic relational deployments, as well as new applications that are emerging all around us all the time. So, who is Ops Manager for? Well, the answer is it's for folks who are operations professionals, administrators, sysadmins, etc., folks who care about SLAs, service level, failover, recovery time, those kinds of things, capacity, reliability, cost, and consistency. Is everything being done in a way that is centralized, controlled, that you can feel comfortable with, that you can feel does not represent risk for you and your business stakeholders? So we're trying to get away, Ops Manager is trying to get you away from having to rely on custom, manual, mistake and risk-prone methodologies. Of course, a lot of us have invested a lot of time in doing robust, scripted operational procedures, and that's fantastic. I'm still hopeful that we can provide into your stack a very useful tool that just does bring in some consistency for the MongoDB specific deployment configuration changes. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. So look, Ops Manager really helps you cut management overhead, follow the MongoDB best practices for automation. You're using automation, meet those SLAs that you and your business stakeholders require, as well as scale easily. Because scaling today, you basically have to be able to sort of scale anything in the event that it becomes successful or becomes more popular or et cetera. You just never know these days, and you don't want to have to invest significant resources into scale. So let's talk specifics. What is Ops Manager really? Well, again, it gives you complete control, and that's something I keep emphasizing because you control the entire application, you build it, you control the infrastructure it lives on, and it allows you to control all of your MongoDB deployments, and that's very important. You can run it really anywhere you want, whether that's in your private data center, private cloud, or even on public cloud infrastructure if you want. I should caution that if you're running in public cloud, you might also consider using our MongoDB management service, fully hosted service, which you can find at mms.mongodb.com. But that service, it doesn't give you that complete control of owning the entire infrastructure. So if complete control is what you want, Ops Manager is a good fit for you. Now, Ops Manager comes with your MongoDB Enterprise Advanced subscription. So, there's no special new licensing here, as long as you have that MongoDB Enterprise Advanced. And importantly, everyone is encouraged to evaluate and develop with Ops Manager in an unlimited fashion. Doing so is completely free. So let's talk a little bit about administration. and sort of how Ops Manager can be used and the processes that it enables in organizations of various sizes. So importantly, Ops Manager has the concept of groups, of users, and of roles. And again, I'm not talking about database users here. That's a separate kind of user, and we'll talk about that later. But literally, we're talking about who's entitled to access Ops Manager, and who's entitled to do what in Ops Manager. And basically, with Ops Manager, you can create as many groups as you want, and you can create as many users as you want, and you can associate any users with any groups. And that's very handy because all of a sudden groups which are associated with various MongoDB deployments, that means you can associate users with MongoDB deployments. And when you mix that in with the functionality that I haven't yet discussed for how Ops Manager adds a lot of value, you realize that you can have users who can only access monitoring data for deployments. You can have other users who can administer certain deployments automation topologies. And you can have other users, probably like yourselves, who are global administrators who can access everything. So a lot of fine-grained control there, and that's very, very powerful. Ops Manager has a REST API that enables integration with all kinds of existing infrastructure and tools that you rely on today. You can basically write middleware to connect that REST API to all kinds of services. So it's very powerful, a lot that can be done there. And I'll talk more later in the presentation. So let's dive into some of the specifics of what Ops Manager can do, and I'm going to start with the one that I'm most excited about, and that is automation. We believe automation really makes operations a lot more simple to reason about, to deal with, to conduct. Traditionally, without Ops Manager, if you wanted to spin up, a many-server sharded cluster, you had to go in there and SSH into all these different boxes and do different kinds of installations, install different components on each, or at least run different components on each, configure them all a little bit differently. There was an order of operations thing you had to worry about. So basically, getting a sharded cluster up and running, required tons of steps, and you could easily shoot yourself in the foot and, do a step wrong. That's just the nature of distributed systems. The beauty of MongoDB is that it enables us to have all the benefits of this horizontal scale-out commodity hardware databases, the NoSQL databases, the best of what NoSQL offers: performance, scalability, flexibility, along with, of course, some of the benefits of relational secondary indexes and rich querying. But now that a lot of that benefit, the horizontal scale-out, the distributed nature of MongoDB is simplified, because with Ops Manager, you have one pane of glass that allows you to manage all of the servers associated with a topology. And separately, I should mention, we have, again, that REST API, which can be used for automation configurations as well. So you can spin up those sharded clusters in our nice UI or through the API. Now, what does automation do for you? Well, it's certainly easy, and it makes it easy to spin up new deployments, as well as to automate or attach to pre-existing deployments that you may have running today. It allows you to do hot upgrades, meaning no downtime upgrades in a rolling fashion. So, the right order is the automation system will use the right order as it upgrades various components of the sharded cluster. It will roll your replica sets, do the upgrades of replica sets in such a way that there's always a primary up, etc. You can scale using our user interface or API. You can easily add or remove shards or replicas, and again, with no downtime, and that's very, very important, and with some peace of mind too. And finally, you can do configuration and management. You can, turn auth on and off. You can add users and roles to your databases. You can resize the op log. All of these things can be done in a few clicks, and that's really just, huge. It's been huge for us anyway. Now, I should suggest that you check out our documentation for what kinds of deployment configurations are currently supported by automation. We currently support what we perceive to be the most important or popular ones. There are still some important ones out there that we're working on, and we'll be delivering on them in the near future. So I do suggest before you try and attach to an existing deployment, you double check that you're supported. Good news is when you try and attach, we do validate to ensure that all of the configurations in your cluster are supported, and you know, we'll let you know if they're not. But we believe that the vast majority are already covered, and we are iterating over time here. So let's talk a little bit about backup. Another of the key legs in the stool, three-legged stool that is this product, which the third leg being monitoring, but I'll talk about it in a minute. Backup, you know, you can't get away from it. This is a critical requirement for any production deployment of a database. As ops folks, we all know we have to do this. We don't want it to get in the way. We want it to be easy and, you know, to be done the right way, in a consistent manner. And that's what Ops Manager does. It allows you to do full point-in-time recovery for a configurable amount of time, but for a more recent amount of time, you can do point-in-time recovery. That is up to the minute for replica sets. And we allow you to configurably define how often you want snapshots to stick around in your system. In other words, you can have them, you can maintain snapshots for, you know, weeks, months, etc. We, by default, weight the snapshots towards recency in order to have a finer-grained understanding of our backups for the more recent time, because we figure, you know, 11 months ago, we probably didn't care about 11 months and 1 day ago, but all are configurable. We have, you know, continuous incremental backups. It's just running. You don't have to worry about it, which is great. And we support both the legacy mmap v1 storage engine from MongoDB 3.0 and the WiredTiger storage engine that we've launched with MongoDB 3.0. Again, it's important to remember that the MongoDB storage engine transition is not an in-place upgrade, but rather not a drop-in upgrade, but rather you have to upgrade your replica sets in a rolling fashion to WiredTiger, something that we suggest doing significant testing on before you do in production. But once you've done that, we'll be able to back you up in WiredTiger and allow you to do restores in WiredTiger. So that's very exciting. Jumping forward here, monitoring. You know, monitoring is critical because it allows us to understand the health of our systems, to know when things are down, to meet our SLAs, etc. So Ops Manager monitoring allows you to have visibility into 100+ key database and system health metrics. You can view things at the host, you know, at the MongoD level or at the replica set or cluster level, so we can sort of visualize full topologies. We can optimize for performance and diagnose problems, which, you know, is critical, especially as the profiles of our applications are changing. You can build nice alerts, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you can basically customize and ensure that you're the first to know when things have changed or there are issues being run into in the health of your cluster. And we have a comprehensive API which allows you to get your monitoring data out in the event that you want it to be included into other monitoring tools that you rely on. Now let's talk a little bit about how this thing works. And the diagrams I'm going to go over are definite simplifications of the real thing, because, you know, this is a complicated distributed appliance, Ops Manager. But what I'd like to do is give you that aha moment. Oh, I get how it works. And I think that these diagrams do a good job of that. So let's first talk about how automation works. Okay. Now, in this diagram, each of the little green boxes represents a server. Okay, or a virtual machine. Now, really, the automation is really so simple that all you need to do is, for every server you want to use with MongoDB or have a MongoDB process running on, you simply now have to install an automation agent on each of those servers. Now, you can configure that agent to point to your Ops Manager and have it be associated with a specific Ops Manager group, but that's all real simple stuff, simple configuration. So anyway, we're talking about a very simple installation of a very lightweight agent, and boom, all of these servers are controllable from Ops Manager. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that I can now use these servers to deploy MongoDB topologies. So, boom, there we go. We can say, I want, 3 config servers of MongoS and 3 MongoD nodes, and basically Ops Manager with the UI or API makes that easy to specify, and the automation agents will build this up. They'll do it in a distributed fashion. They'll, They'll do everything in the right order. And so suddenly we realize it's really easy to reason about provisioning for MongoDB, because all we have to do is provision servers that have this simple automation agent on them. And then we can abstract away all the complexity of what each machine's special role in the cluster is, and simply have Ops Manager be the central interface where we control all of that. Now, I should also say at this point that it's important to realize that we have an automation agent on every server, and that's because the automation agents need to have permissions on each server to run processes locally. So we just couldn't get away from having an automation agent everywhere. But monitoring is a little different. Now I'm jumping into the monitoring view. Monitoring agents, they don't need to be on every server, because actually a monitoring agent just needs to be able to reach the MongoDB processes, and they can do so in a remote fashion in order to centralize all of the data about the processes, the health data, the metrics, etc., and send them to Ops Manager. So the cool thing is, monitoring agents, which are another kind of agent we have, and which can be installed via automation very easily. It's all, you don't have to worry about installing those separately. The monitoring agent, you just have to have one per group, and it will monitor all the MongoDB deployments in your group and send that data straight to Ops Manager. So this is just huge. Even if Ops Manager is not your central pane of glass for monitoring, whether or not it is, suddenly we have a centralized system that brings all the MongoDB-related data from a distributed system into one place for you to action on or build analysis against, whatever you want to do. It's very handy because we've abstracted away the work associated with gathering all of the data from all these different places. And the bigger your MongoDB deployments and topologies get, the more valuable this one is, of course. So now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about backup. And backup is a little bit more complicated, because it isn't just as simple as some agents the way monitoring and automation are. And that's because, backup involves real data, not just metadata. We have to do actual backups of your production systems. So let me describe this, how this works, and suggest up front that the backup architecture is very robust and should be set up with care. And I'll talk later about how it is that we can work with you on this to set this up in a way that really will set you up for success down the road. But let me just describe initially what we're looking at here. Let's first talk about, let's pretend you have a production MongoDB deployment. Now you could have a replica set or a sharded cluster. In this case, we have a replica set and a sharded cluster with 3 shards, each made up of a replica set. So we basically have 4 replica sets to back up, and we're going to describe through this example how backup works. So the first thing we need in order to back up this system is to build into the Ops Manager appliance the ability to maintain what are effectively invisible secondary replicas of each of those replica sets we're backing up, whether a shard or just a standalone replica set. Now, we do that, but we do it in such a way, again, where these invisible replicas really are invisible to the replica sets that they're backing up, so that those replica sets and sharded clusters being backed up don't have any idea that they're there. In other words, this thing is not in the replica set configuration or any of that stuff. But what this means is we can fully control the state of these invisible secondary replicas, Ops Manager can, and as a result, it can ensure that windows of opportunity are created such that consistent snapshots can be created. So we use these invisible secondary replicas to take consistent snapshots periodically and store those snapshots in this block store, which is a large MongoDB deployment that stores all of your snapshots in a compressed and deduplicated fashion. Now, I mentioned that care must be taken in planning for and sizing and installing all the components of this, and that's because, what I've drawn here is a simple looking diagram, but it's important to recognize that for high availability and for scale, a lot of these components are distributed. So care needs to be taken in doing this, and that's where I'll mention later that we can help you with that, and we'd like to, because we think that investing in that up front is a big win. There's a lot of things to consider here. For example, how compressible your data is will determine largely how much infrastructure or storage space you need to store your backups. How rapidly your data changes will determine as well how deduplicatable your data is, and that'll also impact how much storage you need and the capacity requirements for your backup infrastructure. So, a lot of this needs to be planned for, but Ops Manager makes it easy to reason about, and it gives you a framework for doing it right. Because quite frankly, doing a sharded cluster backup without Ops Manager is challenging. I mean, getting a consistent sharded backup framework that works is very difficult, and that's why Ops Manager is here to do it the right way, built from the ground up for MongoDB. We're very excited that as of this release, we're making generally available Ops Manager running on Windows. I'm not sure how many folks on the call are Windows users, but this is a great step for us as MongoDB moves towards feature parity between Linux and Windows as a company goal, and this was a long time coming. But today you can install Ops Manager, of course, on Linux and also on Windows now. You can use monitoring and backup for deployments running on MongoDB deployments running on Linux or Windows. And today you can only use the automation on Linux, but we're working on support for automation on Windows, and it'll come soon. But we're definitely committed to building that out. But again, you can run Ops Manager on Windows and use monitoring and backup with Windows, fully supported today. Let's jump into the user interface a little bit. Basically, actually, let me start from the beginning. The beginning of the experience with Ops Manager is checking out the docs, and I wanted to point out that we have docs at docs.opsmanager.mongodb.com, and we've got this great install a simple test Ops Manager page, which, what it does is it shows you how you can get up and running with Ops Manager in a few minutes on a simple test machine. Now, I should caution that in a production system, you would never run Ops Manager on only one machine because there's so many different components for backup and all the rest to maintain high availability that's just not how you would do it. But for experiencing and understanding how Ops Manager feels, I recommend that everyone try it out by following this tutorial. Now, what's the next step after you've checked out the docs? You install Ops Manager in the terminal, or if you're on Windows, you can install it through our installer, which we're very proud of. But boom, after it's installed, you explore Ops Manager in the browser. Simple as that. You go to the Ops Manager URL at its port, 8080 by default, but if you're running with HTTPS, then it's going to have a different port. And, here it is. It's a slick interface for accessing this central pane. The first user will have to register for a new account, and doing so will make them the global admin for the whole system. But anyone else can come in your organization who has access to this and register for a new account as well. Now, what happens after you register? Well, you quickly create your first group, and boom, you're in. You now can see that we have automation, backup, and monitoring, and we have the ability to get started with each of those. Essentially, this is a blank group. Let's talk a little bit about how it would look to kind of move forward with automation. What we're going to do is install an automation agent on all the servers that we care about. In this case, in this example, I'm going to take 10 servers and install an automation agent on each of them. In other words, basically I can parallel SSH into all of them and just do a quick automation install, configure those automation agents to point to my Ops Manager group, and I'm up and running with control of those agents. Now, why did I do 10? So that I can do two shards, each with a 3-member replica set, 3 for config servers, and 1 for MongoOS. Okay, great. I've got 10 servers up and running. How does that look in the UI? Well, what do I do in the UI to use those 10 servers, I should say? Well, on the deployment page within Ops Manager, again, this is just a blank group, I can click on Add to Manage Deployment, and I can simply select Create New Cluster. Great. That means that I can literally then specify, okay, if necessary, I can choose which config server machines will have my config servers, or if not, I'll just let it randomly choose. It depends on both are options, depending on whether or not you have different kinds of instances you're using for your config servers. All of that is up to you. You can control it all in this interface. But okay, I had 10 servers. I deployed. How does it look afterwards? Well, it basically looks like this in the UI. I have a topology. I see my 2 shards. Great. Now what can I do with this? It's a running MongoDB deployment, running on 267 in this example, MongoDB 267. What can I do? Well, I can, for example, upgrade it. To upgrade it, all I have to do is click the Edit button and change the dropdown to a different version number. Click Apply, click Review and Deploy, and the automation agents do all the work. That's a hot upgrade done in a safe rolling fashion without you having to do very much work at all. I mean, it's a few clicks, very easy, something we're very excited about. I could do maintenance and configuration as well. I can go in and change a lot of the startup parameters. I can change the op log size. That's one that's always been, a little bit of a challenge to do manually. All kinds of things are doable through this user interface, and with the click of a button, deploy. And again, everything that we're seeing here can be done through the API as well, depending on whether or not you're the kind of person who wants to use the interface or use the API. My feeling personally is the interface is a great way to familiarize oneself with the capabilities of the system, and then to kind of learn the kinds of things that the API can do, and then over time develop an intuition for using that API. What else can we do? Well, we can, with a click of a button, turn on auth authentication for any of the clusters in our deployment. And if anyone on the call has enabled auth on a sharded cluster in MongoDB, it is a non-trivial undertaking. I mean, it's quite a few steps. But now with literally a button, a toggle from no to yes, we've turned it on. We have an add user button in the top right. So we can add users not to our Ops Manager group, but rather these are users to the database itself. In other words, we have a new application coming in that wants to, have access to our database or certain databases, read access, let's say. Well, we can create a user for them right here in the interface and give them the entitlements that they require. We can define authorization and roles as well for those users, so that we can, in a fine-grained fashion, with all of the capability that MongoDB, the database, offers for roles, give the right entitlements. How does some of the backup configuration look in the UI? Let's check it out. So this is an example of how a sharded cluster backup looks after it's been enabled in the user interface. And what I wanted to call out here is that there's lots of great configurations here. One is that we can configure the snapshot schedule for the cluster. So, depending on what we want to store and also, how much space we have in our block store and how much we're comfortable keeping around or our various compliance obligations, we can configure the snapshot schedule exactly how we want it. How many days for daily snapshots, how many weeks for weekly snapshots, how many months for monthly, etc. We can also define excluded namespaces, that is, collections that maybe we don't want backed up for various reasons. That can be configured right here in the UI. How does backup restore look in the UI? Well, you just click the restore button as long as you've got a snapshot, and you can pull it via HTTP. You can make it available, I should say, via an HTTP endpoint, or you can have an SCP push to servers that you define. Now, you can. What I'm excited about personally is that you can also do all of this through the API, which means you can script a backup restore yourself, which can be exciting if you want to spin up clusters from backups in an automated fashion. Jumping forward, how does monitoring look? Well, I encourage you to explore. There's just so many different kinds of data that are stored in monitoring, and our interface is really quite exceptional for navigating that data, and that's one of the reasons why, while I think it's great that we have the metric API to get the data out, I would say to folks, it's going to be hard to beat this interface for looking at MongoDB metrics. I know that many of you have application level metrics that are, never going to be something we capture here, but nevertheless, for MongoDB debugging, this is just fantastic. You can scroll to different kinds of time frames. You can associate different kinds of statistics, different kinds of metrics on the same time scale to understand different things happening in parallel. The opportunities are really quite endless. And of course, you can also configure these metrics to trigger alerts. Now, these alerts are highly customizable and can be done based on various thresholds, based on various metrics. Very, very customizable. You can configure how those alerts are triggered. You can have them be sent via email. You can use the API. You can have SMS text messaging. You can integrate with things like PagerDuty. Whatever you rely on, we've tried hard to make sure that we do support. So let's talk a little bit about some next steps that I encourage you all to think about. And that's really, I encourage you to give Ops Manager a go. Now, just to emphasize, Ops Manager is free for unlimited evaluation and development. We want you to give it a go. We want to be on this journey with you and to hear your feedback. It's a very exciting time for us to be releasing this to the users out there of MongoDB, and we want to enable you to do more with MongoDB in your organizations. And so go to mongodb.com/download to fill out a quick agreement that you're just evaluating or developing against it, and get started with it today. Again, the documentation can be found at docs.opsmanager.mongodb.com, and that brings me back full circle to what I mentioned earlier. We, as a company, we'd love to help you out with Ops Manager. We're offering a great consulting service called Ops Optimization, which is basically we're going to come in and help you out with a custom plan for installing, learning about, sizing, doing everything right with Ops Manager so that you can invest a little bit of time now to position yourself to later on achieve a lot of things without as much headaches later on. Because, I do want to emphasize again, while it's great that you can get up and running for evaluating Ops Manager on a single server so easily, a production deployment of Ops Manager really requires a lot of planning. It requires many components. It's a distributed system across many servers that need to be planned for accordingly, including planning for availability, all the things that those of us in operations do think about a lot. Those considerations need to be brought into how we plan for Ops Manager, and as a result, we suggest being very mindful and ideally working with us on that process. But again, very cool how much you can do with this thing. And once you've invested up front in the effort of setting it up appropriately, that's a fixed cost, and you're going to be able to scale it as much as you'll need. So with that, I think we're actually kind of ahead of schedule here. We can move into questions. I hope I wasn't speaking too quickly. I really appreciate that everyone did dial in today. So let me jump into the questions section here. So someone asked about whether user management, and I assume we're talking user management of Ops Manager, can be integrated with Active Directory. And you asked specifically about Kerberos. We support Ops Manager users can be user entitlements can be stored in LDAP, so you can actually have LDAP-based auth. So I think you could use Active Directory with LDAP. Kerberos, not today. Someone had asked if a snapshot is the only option we have for the backup of MongoDB. I don't know exactly what the question intended, but what I think what you may be asking is whether is Ops Manager the only way to back up MongoDB today? And the answer is no. Actually, I suggest you to check out our white paper on backup strategies or our documentation on backup strategies. There are a number of ways you can do backup today, but we've tried to focus on the main pain points that those traditionally had to make it easier to do in a consistent, reliable manner via this appliance. Whether or not this will work with 2.4 and 2.6 or just MongoDB 3.0, we do support 2.4 and 2.6. I would, I think that there may be some early versions on the 2.4 release cycle. Like, I don't think we support 2.4.0, for example, but there's certainly, if you're on the 2.4 tree and you're on the newest version of 2.4, the production stable release, or the newest version of 2.6, you're absolutely supported. Whether there's a current AMI in the AWS market that can be used, that's an interesting question. We don't currently have an AMI that has Ops Manager installed on it. I would also, just as an aside, say that folks who are interested in running on EC2, while you can certainly use Ops Manager on EC2, and if you want to have centralized control and total control over your system, that's a way to go, the way to go, really. Separately, if you're interested in EC2, you should also be looking at MongoDB's management service, which is our fully hosted cloud offering, which has a lot of similar functionality to Ops Manager, but also includes some auto provisioning capability on EC2. So that you can find that at mms.mongodb.com. Let's see. So someone had asked whether the monitoring data for each MongoDB can be downloaded and stored in a repository for historical purposes. So I should say that, by default, our monitoring infrastructure within Ops Manager doesn't store all data forever. But because of the API, which makes the monitoring data available, you can pull it out and do anything you want with it. You could store it however, you would like quite easily. So I think we have a pretty good story there. Someone had asked, how hard is it to add automation on an existing sharded cluster? Let me describe how that would look. You've got a sharded cluster, like in my example. Let's say it's across 10 servers, but it could be across 100 servers if it's a big one, right? To add automation to it, really all you need to do is install an automation agent on every server with a MongoDB process. Now, there's some nuance here whereby you're going to have to run that automation agent as the same user that the MongoDB processes on those servers are running as, because that agent is going to need permissions to basically take over the process. What it'll actually do in a safe rolling fashion behind the scenes is shut down the process and restart a process instantly out of binaries that it controls going forward. But so as long as you get the users right and the permissions on the user that the automation agent is running on, all you have to do is install an automation agent on every server in the sharded cluster, whether it's 10 or 100 servers. And then you have to, as far as how it feels in our user interface, you have to also add the cluster into monitoring first, which is easy because, again, you only need one monitoring agent per group. Once the sharded cluster is monitored, we can actually validate in our user interface that our automation agents are going to be able to support the deployment type that the sharded cluster is using. So if we validate and ensure that we do support the deployment that the sharded cluster uses, the configurations, at that point, we can literally click attach, and our automation agents will take over, and we will now have the sharded cluster managed as if it was spun up originally by automation. So that's really exciting. For those deployment types that are not yet supported, the validation will fail, and again, we will add support for that functionality over time. So someone asked if you can upgrade from 2.6.7 to 3.0 with one click, and so that's a great question. Basically, yes, you can. You can basically select the version and click apply. So maybe it's 3 clicks, but it's 1 click to trigger the deploy. Now, I do want to point out that 3.0 by default runs with the legacy mmap storage engine, and that enables you to do these drop-in upgrades. So you can go from 2.6.7 to 3.0, very easily. I do want folks to realize that 3.0, which also has the WiredTiger storage engine, because that WiredTiger storage engine represents a data format change, you're going to have to basically resync nodes running with that storage engine to do the upgrade to WiredTiger. So the way that would look is, if you wanted to upgrade 2.6.7 to 3.0 with WiredTiger, there's a few extra steps, but still, automation is enormously helpful in the process. And those steps are basically to, in a safe way, upgrade 2.6.7 to 3.0 with the default storage engine, and then at that point, in a careful manner, add replica set members to your replica sets, or shards, and for each of the new members, make sure that they are configured to run on WiredTiger. Do the initial sync for each of those, and in a rolling fashion, you can move your entire cluster over to WiredTiger. Of course, doing so for a production system requires care, and we would suggest, this is a new storage engine, we would suggest do very robust testing of your use case with production simulating load to be absolutely certain that you want to make that upgrade. Do not do it hastily, because this is a major step forward for MongoDB, and there are going to be some changes to performance, mostly improvements, but in some situations, you never know. It could actually be different than what your application is expecting. So be very careful with those WiredTiger upgrades. Somebody had asked, is snapshot the only option for taking the database backup, or do we have other options? I think we answered this question earlier, but maybe I'm misunderstanding it. Snapshot is the way Ops Manager does it, if that's what you mean by the question. There's certainly other ways of doing backups with MongoDB, and I again suggest checking out the documentation. Someone asked, if I unmanage a sharded cluster, how can I add it back to make it managed under Ops Manager? So that's a good question. Basically, if you unmanage a sharded cluster, but you still have automation agents on all of the servers in that cluster, to remanage it, all you need to do is make sure it's in monitoring, and then follow that attach flow I mentioned earlier again. So again, if the automation agents are on all the servers, which is the same thing everywhere, you just have to reattach, and Ops Manager will do that seamlessly. Somebody asked how many MongoDB servers are supported with Ops Manager. I'm not sure I know what this question means. There's a couple things that I think you might be asking there, which is maybe you're asking about licensing. How does Ops Manager licensing work? And if that's what the question's about, then Ops Manager can be used in production or QA test environments with nodes that you have subscriptions for. But again, for development and evaluation, unlimited use of Ops Manager is encouraged. We want you trying it out. If you just mean how many servers can be associated with Ops Manager in terms of kind of limits on the system's capability, Ops Manager can literally work with thousands of nodes. The bigger the system, the more caution and time should be put into sizing the system up front, of course. And we would strongly encourage you to work closely with us in the event that you wanted to go big with Ops Manager to thousands of nodes, but hundreds, dozens, all are supported with Ops Manager. And you can, again, organize them across those groups described earlier and have those different MongoDB deployments associated with different people in your organization, whether you want to set up development or application teams as groups and have them kind of be self-sufficient for some of their development nodes, but maybe you want to take over when they go into production and make sure that you have very robust alerting in place. All of those options are there. Somebody had asked for a PDF of the slides after the fact. Would it be possible? I can't tell you whether a PDF would be possible, although I assume it would be, but this whole entire presentation in video format will be posted to our website after the fact, so you'll be able to come back and check out this whole thing. Somebody asked if we'd be able to see a performance increase for using MongoDB on Compose. I'm not sure what exactly is meant there. Generally, will you see performance increases? That kind of question always depends on, the specifics, the exact use case, the hardware, etc. So, I would suggest try it out and see what happens. Someone asked, is it possible to use automation to have a config server and a replica set on the same machine? And yes, it is certainly possible to do that. It's not, necessarily a MongoDB production best practice. And by the way, that's something that I should kind of mention, that this automation is very powerful. And with great power does come this responsibility, which is that, you still need to kind of familiarize yourself with how MongoDB production best practices should be run so that you can use automation to follow those production best practices. Automation won't force you to. So automation would allow you, for example, like the person asked, to put a config server on the same machine as a replica set. But maybe whether or not you want to do that, you'd have to really think about that. But automation is very flexible and certainly allows you to even do entire sharded clusters on single machines, which again can be fun for testing, but would never be good for production. Somebody asked if uninstalling Ops Manager infrastructure would impact installed MongoDB engine shards or replica sets. I think what you mean is sort of, if you use Ops Manager and then you decide, screw this, I don't want to use Ops Manager anymore, can you keep using MongoDB at that point, or are you sort of stuck? And you can absolutely keep using MongoDB. With anything that becomes monitored or backed up, you can simply take Ops Manager away, and there'll be no impact on your production cluster. With automation, of course, there's a little bit more nuance because the automation agents are, at this point, managing your cluster, but you can always unmanage clusters from automation, and once unmanaged, you can bring MongoDB deployments back into your preferred manual or custom deployment methodology. So someone had asked, how many servers can Ops Manager handle, and does every agent require a license? Okay, so yeah, in terms of how many servers can Ops Manager handle, indeed, as answered earlier, it can go into the thousands literally, but if you go at that scale, you're going to want to, really plan a heck of a lot around making sure that this system is robust enough to handle that load, but into the tens and hundreds, very easily. And you asked, does every agent require a license? Now, again, to remind everyone, for development and evaluation, you can use automation agents, you can use Ops Manager in an unlimited fashion. We want you using it and figuring out if it's going to help you. But for QA, test, and production nodes, licenses are required for MongoDs, data-bearing MongoD nodes, conforming to how we license those. And basically you're going to want to have a license for every data node, and you can you can find on our website more specifics for how we define server and all that stuff, because these days servers are in the cloud or private cloud environment can mean different things, but basically every data node should have a license that you're using in QA, test, or production. But for development, please use it all you want for free. Someone asked if the features in Ops Manager are available in the MongoDB Management Service hosted solution online, and yeah, most of the features in Ops Manager are available in the MongoDB Management Service online. Not all of them, though, because some of the features of Ops Manager are the fact that you control the whole thing. I mean, you are the global administrator of the whole system, and that gives you the ability to do things that you couldn't do in the hosted MongoDB Management Service. And separately, the MongoDB Management Service online has capabilities that Ops Manager does not have, like, for example, pretty awesome auto provisioning on EC2 support, which we do not have an Ops Manager today. Somebody asked, wouldn't the Ops Manager hardware need enormous I/O capacity in order to cope with the load of all shard data? It does concentrate the data from all shards, no? That's a great question. And, that's why, and this, you've hit the nail on the head for why planning the backup architecture is something to be done with care that we recommend working with, that we would suggest you work with us on. Yes, it does require the capacity to have I/O that can keep up with all your shards. The good news is it's distributed. So basically, if you've got servers that can run your shards, you're probably going to have some kind of a similar server for each of those invisible sort of hidden secondaries that are part of the backup appliance. Now, you install them a little bit differently, you configure them a little bit differently, but basically the capacity is going to be similar to those production shards so that you can follow them along and keep up with the I/O requirements. And then the snapshots, again, depending on compressibility and deduplication ability, they'll also require a meaty MongoDB database to store them in, but that one has less I/O load because, it's just for snapshot storage. But great question. And that, again, we recommend working with us to set all that up appropriately, because upfront investment on that has huge payout down the line. So that wraps up the questions that I'm seeing in my interface here. I really hope that the audio and everything worked well today. I'm really appreciative that you all spent the time to come and learn about MongoDB's Ops Manager today. I hope MongoDB is something that you see as an enabler of potential in your organization, that you're excited to have these new tools to be able to scale your impact with respect to how you use MongoDB today. And I encourage you to please, as we wrap up, follow the next steps on this presentation, which will be to give us a little bit of feedback on how the presentation went. We really appreciate that feedback.